Hello and welcome to Understanding and Using the Standards for Christian Anthropology. My name is Dr. Denise Donahue and I work for the Cardinal Newman Society as the Director of the Catholic Education Honor Roll. I'm joined today by my colleague Dr. Joan Kingsland from Rua Woods Press. Joan is a moral theologian and content expert on St. John Paul II's theology of the body. Our agenda for this session includes why standards for Christian anthropology, how the standards are structured, and how to use them. Please feel free to email us with any questions or comments at jkingsland@ruawoods.org or ddonahue@cardinalnewmansociety.org. Our emails will also be provided at the end of this presentation. I would like to begin by situating the standards in context to show what was happening on a national and global level that spurred my involvement and confirmed to me the necessity for these standards for Christian anthropology. In 2019, the Congregation for Catholic Education released the document, Male and Female, He Created Them, Towards a Path of Dialogue on the Question of Gender Theory in Education. And in the very first sentence of that document, it states we are currently facing what might be called an educational crisis, especially in the areas of affectivity and sexuality. It went on to state that in many places, curricula are being planned and implemented which allegedly convey a neutral conception of the person and of life, yet in fact reflect an anthropology opposed to faith and to right reason. The disorientation regarding anthropology, which is a widespread feature of our landscape, has undoubtedly helped to destabilize the family as an institution, bringing with it a tendency to cancel out the differences between men and women, presenting them merely, or instead as merely the product of historical and cultural conditioning. The document starts out by explaining today's hostile climate, which basically deconstructs the human person, separating one's God-given biological sex from gender through an individual's self-determined choice of gender orientation and expression. So we've seen many research reports in the past decade that have confirmed this decline in sexual morality and the confusion of sexual identity among our young people. In 2018, a survey from St. Mary's Press and the Center for Applied Research titled Going, Going, Gone, we were presented with some alarming statistics regarding our young people. And so these results showed that 74% of the respondents who were millennials stated that they left the church between the ages of 15 and 25, and the average age was 13. So that's 8th grade. It stated that most young people disassociated from the church between the ages of 10 years old, that's 5th grade, and 17, so the end of high school. So we want to know, why did they leave? What is it? How can we get these young people back, as the follow-up question to that? So why did they leave? There are multiple reasons they stated they left, but 20% said they just simply no longer believed in God. Many said they saw this disconnect between the faith that they had learned and the life that they were living, the common culture, and others experienced this difficulty reconciling science with religion and the emphasis that we see in schools, especially on empiricism and being able to see everything in order to know, and not understanding really that faith is a very viable way of knowing. So where then do they find their foundation for morality, for determining right and wrong, if not from the church? Well, 50% responded from common sense. It's simply, you know it. From a Barna survey, 74% responded that, well, quote, whatever is right for your life or works best for you is the only truth. A Pew Research poll in 2014 reported that young people believe that every culture must determine what is morally acceptable. And in 2013, a CARA study also reported that 79% of young people believe that right and wrong simply depends on the situation. So we saw this serious moral decline during the last decade, and we're experiencing an even more serious moral decline, in my opinion, right now. And, you know, all summed up in what Pope Benedict said before a 2005 conclave, where he actually was elected our Pope, And in the homily, he said, we're moving towards this dictatorship of relativism, right? We've all heard that, which does not recognize anything as for certain, and which has as its highest goal one's own ego and one's own desires. Well, it seems to me that we've been moving beyond this dictator of relativism into an age of atheism, where we've completely erased any thought or mention of God's wisdom and the beautiful design of man's nature, his body, his soul, for this fragmented and disastrous dualism. But fortunately, the male and female document proposes that we need a clear and convincing anthropology that gives a meaningful foundation to sexuality and affectivity. And so what clearer and more convincing anthropology than to me, I thought St. John Paul II's theology of the body, right, Joan?
Yes, and here I can put in something about, I can say something about adequate anthropology.
Yeah.
St. John Paul II talks about offering an adequate anthropology through his theology of the body. So when we hear the word adequate anthropology, we can think, what does that mean? So we're not talking about bones that have been buried for a long time, the Neanderthal man. We're talking about the living human person now, and we're talking about what that person needs to experience their own dignity and their worth, and to realize where they're going. And that's kind of a sense of anthropology. And I think of Mark and Matthew, where Jesus Christ speaks about the house that's built on sand, and when the winds blow, because the sands are shifting, the house will crumble under stress. And then he speaks about a house that's built on rock. And that house, when the winds blow and the earth quakes, because it's built on rock, the house stands. So what we need in an adequate anthropology is, what can a person build their life upon? What firm rock can a person found their life on, so that they can head forth through the storms of life and get where they're supposed to head, where they're supposed to arrive? And so this adequate anthropology answers questions about who is the human person. It answers what's the value and purpose of human freedom. It tells us, where did I come from and where am I going? It talks about our relationship with other people. You know, we can go back to the 17th century and we can talk about Thomas Hobbes, who is the one who invented the idea of the social contract. So he said that we're most free when we're not in society. And we only accept to be in society the constrictions by a social contract, where everybody is constricted, and it's a burden that's put upon us, but it's the only way that we can be safe, because otherwise man is a wolf to man. And that's so far from the true vision of the human person, that we're actually meant to be in society, and we are fulfilled by being in communion with others. So this adequate anthropology reveals who we are. And if really we get down to the grain of who we are, it's we are made, first of all, out of love. We're created in the image of God, and not just through our reason and will, which is also in the image of God, but in a very particular way, by being in the communion of persons. When God created man, he said, let us make man in our own image. So there was a we there. So there's the Holy Trinity that lives in a communion of persons, and that calls us to that communion of persons that we can enjoy forever in eternity. So that's where we're going. That's where we're meant to be. And Christ reveals that to us. Christ is the rock upon which we can build our lives, and he reveals who we are completely. Mm-hmm. So this adequate anthropology provides these sorts of answers about who we are and where we're going and what happiness really is. Mm-hmm. And I really experience fulfillment when I learn how to give myself as a gift to others. So that's sort of like the secret of life, the secret to happiness, the secret to fulfillment. And when we don't have that, and one of the most famous lines that St. John Paul II quoted from Gaudium et Spes, number 24:3, the person remains a mystery to his own self until he learns to make a gift of himself. So this is what we're providing people, this adequate anthropology, so that people can build happy, solid lives and achieve fulfillment and happiness forever.
So definitely when you're working with standards and curricula, you want to see an alignment between standards, educational objectives, learning targets, assessments, and so forth. So it was quite natural that we broadened the standards out into a theme. And for what particular themes? What themes should we include in the standard? And Joan had a great deal of input into deciding the particular themes. And you can see, I think on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But there are 12 themes, and they're all based on John Paul II's terminology and phraseology, which is kind of new to someone who is coming into his writings, some of the phrases that he's coined, like gift of self, right? Mm-hmm. So I think on the next slide, Joan, you want to talk a little bit about the themes and how we came to those different themes?
Sure. So the way that the St. John Paul II's theology of the body is structured is he thinks in time, right? He gives us the whole map of time. He takes us with at the suggestion of Jesus Christ, right? Who's asked about divorce, and he's told Moses permitted divorce. And he goes, yes, but that wasn't how it was at the beginning. And so twice in that conversation, our Lord refers back to the beginning. So St. John Paul II goes back to the beginning, and there's so much that he takes out of these short passages, really, in Genesis. There's so much he takes from there to look at original man, what he calls, right? That's at the beginning of time or outside of time, or however you want to put it. Original man. And in original man, we've got original solitude. So this sense of how was man designed by God? How did God desire us to be? And so we've got this original solitude, original unity, original nakedness, which when you read the standards, it explains that you can understand a little bit more. And then there's the time that's called historical man. So this is where we all find ourselves. And so this is fallen man, but also man who's been called by Christ, who doesn't leave us and who shows us the way. And then we've got the eschatological man, which is what we're called to be, what we'll be like in heaven, how the human person will be in fulfillment. So this whole stretch of time is covered, and we find this here, like as I said already, original unity, original nakedness, original solitude. Those come in the beginning. Then we've got the historical man there, number 9. Then we've got eschatological man, number 12. Then these other themes fit in there in different ways. So creation is a gift. I guess I can speak of some of the other ones, thinking about how there's a worldview that comes with this, right? I mentioned Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes helped, start this other worldview, a worldview that involves seeing the outside world as something that's against me, that I have to protect myself against, and that also that I can manipulate and use, versus this concept of this worldview, where creation comes as a gift. And the greatest gift of all is the human person, right? When God created the rest of creation, he said, it is good at the end of each day. But after creating the human person, he said, it is very good. So we've got this vision of reality as something good, and as something given to us by a living God, and given as a gift. And the human person is at the pinnacle of creation. And he's given dominion over all creatures and all reality. The human person is told to cultivate the earth and to take care of the earth. The human person is given that as a gift. And the human person is also given the other person as a gift. So all is gift. So there we've got gift of self. And then we see body-soul unity, and we see body reveals the person. It's so important in theology of the body to understand this sacramental element, not capital S, but small s, the sacramental element of creation. all of creation reveals the goodness of God. And then in particular, even the human body reveals God. And it reveals the communion of persons, right? Because we can see in the body of the human person that we're made to be a gift for the other. Male and female, women and man and woman are meant to be a gift for each other. So this sacramentality of reality is very present, and we see that in body, soul unity, and body reveals the person. Then I'd mentioned earlier this communion of persons. This is core, right? That there's the Trinity. Communion of persons, we can understand that we're made in the image of the triune God. And our fulfillment is going to be the self-gift, like the gift of self within the Holy Trinity. Then purity of heart virtue has to do with the fact that we achieve fulfillment by our acts are related to each other. They're not just indifferent acts that I do one after the other, but my acts actually change who I am interiorly, not just what's outside of me. And so I'm changed by the good I do. I'm made more virtuous. I'm made more aligned to the good. I'm made more like Christ. Mm-hmm. And so this virtue that is formed in me by the good acts that I do is also connected to the Holy Spirit who works within me. So God isn't outside of me putting this law upon me that I have to do that doesn't have to do with my good. He's actually helping me fulfill my good. And he does it by grace within me. So this purity of heart, just St. John Paul II talks about how there's, he says, blessed are the pure in heart, quoting from the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. And we can understand that pure of heart in a general sense of being detached from sin, up from all sin. And so this building in virtue, purity of heart, the Holy Spirit working within us, from there comes the fruits of the Holy Spirit. With love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, fidelity, self-control. All of these things come as a fruit of the Holy Spirit working through us and bringing us to fulfillment. And then lastly, vocation, this call that we have, this gift of self. We develop vocation because that has to do with our ultimate fulfillment and the gift of self. So that's kind of captured why these 12 themes. And our reviewers recommended we add the 5th theme and the 7th theme, and we were happy to do it because it did kind of round off what we had.
Yeah, especially body, soul unity. You know, when that was recommended, I thought, oh my gosh, yes, of course. You know, this is what we're seeing. This is the crisis of the age, and we definitely need to pull that out. Now, it's not that it wasn't already in there. The body reveals the person. I mean, it was subsumed within that standard itself, but by making it more explicit, we're actually assisting teachers to see the urgency and the necessity of particularly working with this body soul unity standard. So
yeah. But just hopefully this helps make clear what we're about in offering these anthropology standards. This is the foundation. This is the understanding of who we are. And from there, we can answer these difficult questions about sexuality, right? So you're just talking now, you're referring to that now, Denise, about the gender issue, right? When we make clear that there's a body-soul unity, then that's clear that there's a male and a female. And it's this male and female is right in our very being. It's not something we can change. That question is answered kind of in advance before it's even articulated, right? So we're getting down to the roots and the basis of who we are, and that's going to solve and give us the source from which we can answer the sticky questions.
Yeah. Exactly. So to move on before we move on from this slide, I just want to make note that each one of the standards has an identifier, and you'll see that right at the bottom under the example. So the first letter is, in this particular case, for kindergarten, or it would be a number for a grade. The second number is the number of the theme that the standard represents. And then the last number is simply the number of that standard within that particular theme. We used Dr. Ballstein's translation for our sources, and we moved out of standard format writing. Basically because we wanted the standards to be accessible to more people, more teachers, and we understand that many teachers haven't had any exposure at all to John Paul's writings, specifically theology of the body. So we included with the standard a reference to the TOB, the specific references that a teacher could go to, as well as the Catechism of the Catholic Church. So there's no hunting and pecking. There's no, where do I find information about this? It's basically, there it is. You know, this, it probably takes about 15 minutes to go and then form yourself on what the standard is specifically asking, so that then you can create your educational objectives from the standard, your learning targets, your student I can statements, and so forth. So Joan, do you want to, there's another reason why we actually put a resource right after that, and that's basically so that a teacher can more deeply understand John Paul II's nuances, particularly even here the first one, express that creation is a gift from God who is all loving. So remember we talked about this a little bit, about how a teacher might kind of look at that. There's two different concepts here. You know, there's the concept of a gift, creation is a gift, and then the concept of God who is all loving. So in order not to step on the shoes of a solid religion program that's already teaching multiple standards, we actually chose the gift theme, and we're presenting it in kindergarten very early on, very naturally, right? So you can look at it both vertically and horizontally, right? Horizontally, it shows at which grade level the themes are presented. So you'll see that each time a theme is revisited, the standards provide either new content, a new perspective. It's worded to elicit a deeper meaning at developmental levels. So you can see it on a horizontal perspective. The standards can be used with a spiraled, a massed, or an interdisciplinary curriculum. Standards are standards. They're what students should know, be able to do, and be like at a particular point in time. So these are leveled standards, and they're based on learning progressions, basically. So vertically, you can see in kindergarten, there's 4 specific themes that are presented. In 6th grade, there's actually 6 or 7 themes that are presented. And there's really a reason why this was done, because we wanted to allow entry points for schools to have either middle school programs if they wanted to begin in 6th grade, without losing a full body of knowledge that the K-5 program actually presents. So in 6, 7, and 8, you can have a full program. In K-5, you can have a full program. And in K-8, you definitely get the full program. And you may want to eliminate some of the standards in 6th grade, which are definitional standards that ground the student at a 6th grade level in areas such as perhaps even gift or creation. In creation, you'll see that come back around again. So
the original, we defined the original solitude, original unity, original nakedness. So like you're saying, Denise, that's not necessary if they've been in the program from kindergarten, they know those things.
Right, right. And if you want to move to the next slide, we'll show a little bit about the theme and how actually the standards progress from kindergarten through 8th grade. And so most teachers and superintendents, you're all familiar with educational objectives and writing those objectives and using Bloom's taxonomy, cognitive taxonomy, the affective taxonomy, as well as Webb's depth of knowledge for cognitive complexity. And so this is really where I felt I could help Joan with the standards she had written, is that we really need to make them a little more rigorous for the developmental level, because they're actually building one upon the other. So the first theme, what I want to point out from creation is a gift. This is a great learning progression here, because in kindergarten we have K 1.1, it says to express that creation is a gift from God who is all loving. And then in first grade, 1.1.1, we have express a sense of wonder for all of God's creation. So we're working with the intellect and the affect within the standards themselves. So we want to elicit a sense of wonder of creation in kindergarten. I mean, first grade, it's definitely not limited to first grade. Kindergartners can exhibit wonder as well of that, but it's important to not always think on that cognitive level, but to, we're the whole person, right? Body, soul, and I'm getting into Joan's area. but yeah, so the standards themselves actually mirror that human person. And so it graduates up into, for instance, fifth grade to compare and contrast. And then it goes on even to the next slide. I want to move a little bit forward. So we have
just before you move on, Denise,
okay.
I just want to emphasize something that you said,
Yep.
vocabulary word that I think is really important in grasping how these standards are, have a very particular goal. When you were talking about 1.1.1, express a sense of wonder, you said we're looking to elicit from the students something. So that's a very particular word, elicit. You know, you think about math, and when you teach a math equation to children, you teach them how to do math, you're not really trying to elicit something from them, right? You're trying to teach them where they can just do something, they can repeat it, and it's not really emotional at all, you know, it's just factual. Can they multiply 3 by 3 or 18 times 5 or whatever? Here, it's when you said affect, I know lots of our listeners will understand this, but we're looking for something that you don't put into somebody or like, it's something you draw out from the person. So
dispositions, attitudes, beliefs, approaches.
And this is where we'll see success in the standards is there in these dispositions, this attitude towards life and this vision on the world. So it's much more than a knowledge that, you know, we can't really test this in a typical way of like true or false or some kind of essay or something. It's going to show in the way they live their life.
Yeah, and how they interact with each other and the belief in God and in his creation and wonder. Yeah, I think it's great. So John David, if you want to hit the next one, there's sixth grade again. And sixth grade, we have exhibit wonder and awe. See, we had that in first grade, at the generosity of God and the gifts of his abundant and beautiful creation. So we have some adjectives that have been added. We're at a higher developmental level. We're still working with the affect of the person, but we're looking at God's abundance of gifts that he has given us in creation and the beauty of creation. And from that, there can be many, many discussions that teachers can have. But then to show how the standards, which in the same theme have different perspectives, the seventh grade theme has students providing examples of rightly ordered desire given by God. So we're still in the theme of creation, and the rightly ordered desire, for me, Joan, that was the commandment, thou shalt not eat of the tree in the middle of the garden. I mean, so we're in line with how God made us. And then our disordered desire is, but I want things my way. I want this humanism, right? I can save everything because I have an intellect and I have a will. And so I just simply want to rely on myself and make those types of decisions. And I'll let you jump in right here in a minute, but we asked that students propose that creation should be received as a gift and not manipulated. This is the very last standard here, is proposing is a synthesizing standard. Here a student has had either 3 years or 8 years of creation as a gift, and now we're asking them to actually work with that theme and to take a position that, you know, things are made as God has made them, right? All of creation has a certain order or it's organic. It was made in a very specific way, and that there are some things that we can manipulate, and then there are some that we simply can't. And this gets into all the moral ethics that you're teaching, right, Joan, to your seminarians. So it's quite a bit of difference between the comprehension that we saw in kindergarten and the response that we're hoping both cognitively and affectively I'm hoping to elicit from an 8th grader, who's moving on into high school at this point.
And notice what happens when someone is proposing this. If they arrive to this and they're actually able to propose this, it means they're going to be looking on creation, right? Reality as a gift that they need to approach with wonder and awe and gratitude versus what it says there, versus manipulating, dominating, controlling reality. So science is something good, but science doesn't permits us to do many things that we should ask whether we ought to or not. And this approach helps us to understand what we ought to do and what we ought not to do.
So we actually created a glossary, right? Joan, talk a little bit about this. Why do we actually need this?
Well, this goes with the teachers who are being asked to teach something that they're probably not familiar with. So we wanted to key into the core ideas, the notions that are there that they really need to be able to understand clearly in order to be able to teach. So these show up in the content, well, at least our content, and it needs to show up in other content. And from there you build and you develop what the whole theology of the body is. But these are the core ideas or concepts.
Even though we used the Rua Woods curriculum and the responses, the feedback from the teachers as a foundation for the standards, we were very careful to be able to remove the standards from the curriculum so that these standards could be used with any curriculum or any program or any publisher who wants to create a set of standard, materials for Christian anthropology. So, I mean, those discussions were going back and forth between us is like, it can't be just tied to the Rua Wood program, but it needs to be a standalone set. So it's open to anyone.
The last thing I would say is, as I've been in contact with different, with helping with the training over the years, I've been in contact with different schools and teachers who've been teaching theology of the body. And I just want to encourage you, if you're thinking of doing this, to reach out to these people who've already been doing it and hear what happens in the school where theology of the body, where these anthropological standards are being taught. Because this is something, I mean, when you work with adults, when you work with young people, when someone realizes what their dignity is, when someone realizes that their worth doesn't come from something, the way other people treat them, or from even what they do, right? We all make mistakes, we all sin, we all fall. And it doesn't come from that. When we, or from what people have done to us, as I've said, when we realize our dignity comes from being loved by this God in an unconditional way, and that we're called to this love. When we really realize that, we realize what our dignity is, what our self-worth truly is. That's not based on what I do. And this is a source of great security and great happiness. And you can see how schools and individuals blossom when they really, when they learn this and when they take it on and they have this lovely, healthy, happy view of who the human person truly is and who the person is called to be.